The hospital room was quiet, except for the rain tapping against the window. Emma lay on the bed, exhausted, one hand resting on her stomach. After months of waiting, the day had finally come. In a few hours, she would meet her baby. A small smile crossed her face. "Can you believe it?" she asked to her husband, Daniel, stood near the window, staring out at the parking lot below. He didn't smile back. Emma had noticed the change in him for weeks now, the way he'd grown quieter, the way his phone seemed to live in his hand. Whenever she asked if something was wrong, he gave the same answer. "I'm just stressed from work." At first, she'd believed him. Now she wasn't so sure. She said again. He turned. "What? You seem nervous." He forced a smile. "Everything's fine." She wanted to believe him. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of their lives, and she didn't want to spend it arguing, so she let it go. A nurse came in to check on her. "Looks like the baby will be here soon," she said kindly. Emma felt a rush of excitement. Daniel just nodded. The hours crawled by. Doctors came and went. The contractions grew sharper. And through it all, Emma kept losing track of Daniel, sometimes beside her, sometimes gone for long stretches into the hallway, each time returning a little more distant than before. At one point, she caught him reading something on his phone. His face changed, not with happiness, but with something tighter. Worry? Maybe. When he noticed her watching, he locked the screen fast. "Who was that?" "No one. Daniel, it's work." The answer came too quickly, and something cold settled in Emma's chest. But another contraction hit before she could say anything else, and the world narrowed to pain. "You're doing great," one of them said. Emma squeezed Daniel's hand, and for a second she thought she saw tears in his eyes, except they didn't look like joy. They looked like guilt. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced down, and whatever he saw made him go pale. "I need to step outside for a minute," he said. "What?" "Now, I'll be right back." He was gone before she could answer. 5 minutes passed. Then 10, then 20. A nurse noticed Emma watching the door. "Everything okay?" "My husband stepped outside. I'm sure he'll be back soon," the nurse said gently, and Emma nodded, even as something inside her began to shrink. She called his phone. No answer. She called again. Straight to voicemail. Then her labor took over completely, and there was no more room for fear, only the work of bringing her daughter into the world. A cry filled the room. "It's a girl," a nurse said, smiling, and placed the baby in Emma's arms. Tiny fingers curled, eyes still closed. Perfect. For one suspended moment. Nothing else existed. Not the pain, not the fear, not even Daniel. Then Emma looked toward the door. Still closed. "Has my husband come back?" she asked quietly. The nurse looked around the room. "No, dear." An hour passed. Then another. Daniel never came back. Finally, a nurse walked in, holding a small envelope. "A man asked me to give this to you. Where is he?" The nurse hesitated. "He already left." Emma's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single line. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." She read it again and again, until the words stopped making sense as words and became something else. A wall, a door slamming, a life cut in half. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, her newborn daughter slept peacefully in her arms. And for the first time, Emma understood what it meant to be completely alone. The first few days at home passed like a dream, the kind that sits on your chest and won't let you breathe. Emma sat on the small couch with her daughter, sleeping against her, the note still on the kitchen table where she'd left it. She must have read it 100 times by now. It hurt the same every time. At first, she told herself he'd come back, that he'd panicked, but days became weeks. His phone stayed off. His social media vanished. Even his friends claimed they had no idea where he'd gone. Slowly, the truth settled in. Daniel wasn't coming back. One evening, a knock at the door turned out to be a courier with an envelope, a bill. Then another arrived the next day. Electricity, rent, medical expenses, insurance, they kept coming. And Emma sat at the kitchen table late one night with a calculator, counting what she had left. She counted twice, hoping she'd made a mistake. She hadn't. It wasn't enough. Not even close. Before, she and Daniel had split everything. Now it was just her and a baby who needed everything. A few weeks later, a different kind of letter arrived. Final notice. Rent overdue. Emma stared at it for a long moment, her hands trembling. The landlord had been patient. Patience, apparently, ran out. She looked around the apartment, the old furniture, the walls that needed paint. It wasn't much, but it was home, and it was the only home her daughter had ever known. She wasn't going to lose it without a fight, so she started looking for work. The problem was always the same. Nobody wanted to hire a woman with a newborn and no childcare. She made calls while rocking the baby to sleep, filled out applications during naps, and watched most employers go quiet the moment they heard about her situation. The nights were long. The baby cried. Emma barely slept, catching an hour here and there, before being pulled awake again. And still, every morning, she got up and tried again. One afternoon she opened the fridge and found almost nothing: a carton of milk, a few eggs, some bread. She closed the door quietly and stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of it all. Less than 2 months ago, she'd been planning a future with her husband. Now she was wondering how she'd make rent. A soft cry pulled her back. Her daughter was awake. Emma picked her up, and for a moment, just a moment, the bills disappeared. The fear disappeared, and there was only this small person looking up at her. "You need me, don't you?" Emma whispered. The baby wrapped a tiny hand around her finger, and Emma found herself smiling through tears she hadn't noticed falling. "I can't give up," she thought. "Not now. Not ever." A few days later, a small opportunity appeared. A local bookstore needed help organizing inventory a few hours a week. The pay was barely anything, but it was something, and Emma took it without hesitation. A kind elderly neighbor agreed to watch the baby during her shifts, and slowly, the money helped. A little, the bills kept coming anyway. Some weeks felt like running uphill with a mountain strapped to her back every time she got ahead. Something else fell due. One rainy evening, the landlord himself knocked. He stood quietly in the hallway, not unkind, which somehow made it worse. "I need the overdue rent soon," he said. "I'm trying." "I know you are." He paused. "If things don't improve, I may not have a choice." Emma nodded. She understood exactly what he meant. After he left, she leaned against the locked door for a long moment, and then she heard it. Laughing, not crying. Laughing, for the first time, drifting from the other room. It was small, simple, and it cracked something open in her. Emma walked over, picked her daughter up, and laughed too. Really laughed. For the first time in months, maybe life wasn't fair. Maybe Daniel was gone for good. Maybe the future was a question mark. But holding her daughter close, Emma made herself a promise. No matter how hard it got, she'd keep going. Because one day, her daughter would know the truth, that when everyone else walked away, her mother stayed. Winter came early that year. Wind pushed against the apartment windows with a low whistle that filled the small living room past midnight. Emma sat at the kitchen table in the light of a single lamp. Her daughter Lily, now a few months old, slept in her crib nearby. For once, the apartment was completely quiet. No crying, no bills, no phone calls. Most people would have used the silence to rest. Emma couldn't. There was too much in her head. An old pen sat beside a blank sheet of paper, and after a while, almost without deciding to, she picked it up. Dear Daniel, she hadn't said his name out loud in months. Everyone told her to forget him, to move on, but some things don't let go that easily. The words came slowly at first, then faster than she could keep up with. She wrote about the hospital, about the fear of him not coming back, about the nights she'd stayed up holding Lily, wondering if there'd be enough for food. Every memory found its way onto the page. The more honest it got. I hated you for leaving. She stared at that line for a while. Simple, true. Then she kept going. The birthdays he'd miss, the first smiles, the first laughs, all the small things a father should have been there for, and now never would be. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away and kept writing. It wasn't only anger on the page. There was grief too, for the future she'd once pictured so clearly. Birthdays, school plays, family dinners. Instead, it was just her and Lily, and some nights she wondered if Daniel ever thought about them at all. Whether he missed his daughter, whether he regretted any of it, she didn't know. And honestly, she wasn't sure she wanted to. By the time the clock pushed past 1, 6 pages covered the table. Her hand ached, her eyes burned, but something in her chest felt lighter than it had in months. The feelings that had been sitting inside her for so long finally existed somewhere else. She read it all back, start to finish. Some parts made her cry again. Some made her angry all over. The last line stopped her cold. You broke my heart, but you will never break our daughter's future. She sat with those words for a long time. Then she folded the pages, slid them into an envelope, and considered, just for a second, actually mailing it. Maybe he deserved to read it. Maybe he deserved to feel exactly what he'd put her through, but sending it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring him back, wouldn't pay a single bill, wouldn't make life easier for Lily, and it wouldn't help Emma move forward, either. That's when she realized the letter had never really been for Daniel. It was for her, a way to put the pain down so she could stop carrying it everywhere. She tucked the envelope behind a row of old books on the shelf, where no one would find it. A reminder of a chapter she had no intention of living in forever. A small sound came from the crib. Lily was awake, blinking sleepily in the dark. Couldn't sleep either. Emma whispered, and Lily answered with a small laugh. Emma lifted her up, and the baby rested her head against her shoulder, warm, safe, trusting. For months, Emma had been counting everything she'd lost. But sitting there in the quiet, holding her daughter, she finally noticed what was left: hope. Small, quiet, not dramatic at all, but it was there, and it was enough. Outside, snow began to fall over the empty street. Inside, Emma rocked Lily gently, the hidden letter sitting behind the books, a story of heartbreak no one would ever read. A new story was just getting started. Not one built on loss this time, but on something steadier. 5 years went by faster than Emma ever expected. The baby who'd once slept against her chest was now a small whirlwind of a girl who filled every room she walked into. Lily was 5, full of questions, obsessed with drawing, and capable of telling a story that wandered absolutely everywhere before it ended. Life still wasn't easy, but it was no longer the life everyone had quietly predicted for her. Back when Daniel left, people had their theories. She'd move away. She'd lose the apartment. She'd never really get back on her feet. A few even guessed she'd eventually go looking for him. Emma never argued with any of it. She just kept showing up to work, to Lily. To the next problem, the bookstore job hadn't paid much at first, but Emma treated it like it mattered. She showed up early, stayed late, learned the business inside and out. The owner noticed. A year in, she got a full-time position. Then, a promotion. The paycheck still wasn't huge, but for the first time in years, it was steady, and steady felt like everything. She wanted more, though. Not for herself. For Lily. Most nights after putting her daughter to bed, Emma sat at the kitchen table working through online courses. Business, accounting, management, anything that might open a door later. Some nights she fell asleep over the laptop. Some mornings she woke up exhausted before she'd even started. But she kept at it, and whenever she felt like giving up, she'd glance toward Lily's door and find the reason to keep going. The years changed her. The frightened young woman who used to cry over unpaid bills was gone. In her place was someone steadier, sharper, harder to knock down than one afternoon. The bookstore owner called with news. He was retiring. Instead of selling to a stranger, he wanted to offer Emma a partnership. She thought he was joking. He wasn't. "You've kept this place running for years," he told her. "I trust you with it." It took weeks of thinking. The investment would mean putting in nearly everything she'd saved. The idea terrified her. But for the first time, fear didn't stop her. It pushed her forward instead. She said yes. The months that followed were some of the busiest of her life inventory. Finances, customers, staffing, all of it. She came home exhausted most nights. But something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something. And it was working. Customers kept coming back. Sales kept climbing. And slowly, the bookstore became one of those places people in the neighborhood just went. People started recognizing her differently too. Not as the woman whose husband left. As the woman who ran the bookstore and worked harder than anyone. One evening at a school event, Emma stood beside Lily's table while parents filled the room. She overheard two women talking nearby, not realizing she could hear. "Isn't that Emma?" "I think so. I remember when everyone said she'd never recover after her husband left." The first woman laughed. "Guess they were wrong." Emma kept her eyes on Lily's project and said nothing, but inside, something settled. Not because anyone had finally noticed her, because they'd finally stopped looking at her like a cautionary tale. On the drive home, Lily sat in the back seat clutching a small trophy. "Mom, yeah. Are we rich?" Emma laughed. "No, sweetheart." Lily thought about that for a second. "Then why do we seem happier than everybody else?" Emma glanced at her in the mirror, caught off guard. "Because happiness isn't really about money," she said finally. Lily nodded like that, settled it completely, then went right back to talking about a cartoon she'd watched twice that week. Emma just smiled and shook her head. Some things never changed. That night, after Lily was asleep, Emma sat alone in the living room. The apartment looked different now. Bills paid, fridge full. The future no longer something to be afraid of. On the shelf sat the old envelope, untouched in 5 years. She walked over and rested her hand on it for a moment, then smiled and let it go. Her story wasn't about the man who left anymore. It was about the woman who stayed, who fought, who didn't quit. And somewhere out there, without knowing it yet, Daniel was about to find out exactly how wrong everyone had been about her. Saturday mornings were always busy at the bookstore, customers browsing, kids parked in the reading corner, the smell of coffee drifting through the shelves. Emma loved these mornings. 5 years ago, she'd been worried about making it through the month. Now she ran a business she'd helped build from nothing. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and she never took that for granted. Lily came running up to the counter, holding a book nearly as big as she was. "Can we get this one?" "You already picked 2. But this one has dragons." "That's a very serious reason." "It is." Emma laughed and gave in, and a couple of nearby customers smiled at the exchange. Small moments like this were everything, the kind she once wasn't sure she'd ever get to have. Around noon, she left the store for a business event downtown, leaving a trusted employee in charge. The event was at a hotel conference hall, full of local business owners talking investments and marketing over coffee and pastries. Years ago, rooms like this would have made Emma nervous. Not anymore. Confidence, she'd learned, doesn't show up all at once. Out of every hard thing you survive. She joined a conversation near the refreshment table, and the afternoon moved along easily enough. And something about him caught her eye. Not recognition exactly. Just a flicker of familiarity she couldn't place. He looked older than she expected someone to look. Gray threading through his hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He carried himself differently too, less certain, more worn down. Emma glanced at him for a second, then went back to her conversation. Across the room, the man noticed her too. Something about her seemed familiar, though he couldn't say what. The confident woman, laughing with a small group, looked nothing like anyone he remembered. Their paths crossed near a display table. He bumped her shoulder lightly. "Oh, sorry, it's okay." Their eyes met, and for a second neither of them said anything. He frowned slightly, like he was trying to place her face. She felt it too, that strange tug of recognition with nothing behind it yet. He held out his hand. "I'm Daniel." For a moment everything around Emma seemed to go quiet. Daniel, 5 years. 5 years, and here he was, older, grayer, but unmistakably him. The man who'd walked out of a hospital room and never come back. The man whose absence had shaped nearly every hard year that followed. No flood of anger, just a strange, steady calm. The kind that comes from realizing someone no longer has any power over you. He was still watching her, still trying to place her. "It's nice to meet you," he said. She almost smiled. He had no idea. "None at all." She shook his hand. "Nice to meet you too. Have we met before?" For years, Emma had imagined this exact moment 100 different ways, yelling, demanding answers, making him explain himself. Instead, she just stood there, calm, steady. "No," she said. "I don't think so." He nodded slowly, like he half believed her and half didn't, and then someone called his name from across the room. He excused himself and disappeared into the crowd. Emma stood still for a moment, waiting for some delayed reaction to catch up with her. It never came. What she felt instead was something closer to relief, proof that the woman he'd left behind didn't exist anymore. Hadn't for a long time. By the time the event wrapped up, the sun was low. Back at the bookstore, Lily was curled up by the front window with a sketchbook. And the moment she spotted Emma, she came running. "You're back." Emma hugged her. "I sure am." "Did your meeting go okay?" For a second, Emma thought about telling her everything, all of it, right there. But Lily was 5. There'd be time for that later. Not today. "Yes," Emma said. "It went really well." As they got ready to close up, Emma glanced out the window, and there he was. Daniel, standing by a parked car across the street, looking straight at the bookstore, at her, at Lily. His expression had changed completely. The confusion was gone, replaced by something else, the look of a memory clicking into place. Piece by piece until the whole picture suddenly made sense. Emma felt her stomach tighten. She knew exactly what that look meant. Daniel had remembered. And for the first time in 5 years, he was starting to understand who she really was and who the little girl beside her might be. Daniel sat across from Emma in the small office above the bookstore, the city lights starting to glow through the window as evening settled in. Neither of them spoke for a while. 5 years of silence. 5 years of questions with no answers. And now, finally, they were sitting across from each other. He looked different up close, older, tired. Something heavy behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. Emma said nothing. "I know I don't deserve it." He looked down at his hands. "I've thought about that day more than you'd believe. The hospital." He nodded. "The worst mistake of my life." Emma studied him for a moment. She'd pictured hearing those words for years, and now that they were here, they landed strangely small. Not nothing, just smaller than she'd expected. "You missed everything," she said, evenly. Her first smile, her first birthday, her first day of school. He closed his eyes like each one hit somewhere specific. "I know no," Emma said. "You don't. Not rooming." The room went quiet again. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and set an old photograph on the desk, the two of them, years ago, before any of it. Before Lily, before the note. "I never stopped carrying this," he said. His voice catching. Emma looked at the photo, but didn't touch it. He looked up at her. "Is there any chance that I could be part of Lily's life?" The question sat in the air between them, Through the office's glass wall, Emma could see Lily downstairs, curled up with a book, completely unaware. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then she stood. Daniel's face fell. He clearly expected the worst. "I won't decide this tonight," Emma said. "What do you mean?" "It isn't only my decision anymore." She glanced toward the window, toward Lily. "She's not a baby. She's a person. And whatever happens, she gets a say in it too." Daniel followed her gaze, and something in his expression shifted, like he was seeing his daughter. Really seeing her, for the first time. Not as an idea, as someone he'd have to actually face. His eyes filled. Emma walked toward the door, then stopped. "There's something you should know." He looked up. For the first time that evening, Emma's expression wasn't calm anymore. It was sad, not angry. "Just sad. The day you left," she said. "I spent years wondering why. Really wondering. Not just that you left, why." His jaw tightened. "Last week," she said, "I finally got an answer." Daniel went still. "What answer?" Emma opened the desk drawer and took out the same worn envelope she'd hidden behind those books years ago. But the letter inside it wasn't hers anymore. She placed it on the desk. Daniel stared at it. Confused then, his face drained of color. He recognized the handwriting immediately. A handwriting he hadn't seen in 5 years and never expected to see again. "Where did you get this?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "You tell me." His hands started to shake. Emma walked to the door and paused there. Looking back at him one last time, "The truth," she said quietly, "doesn't always come from where you expect it to." Then she stepped out and closed the door gently behind her, leaving Daniel alone with the envelope, staring at it like it might answer him back, afraid to open it, more afraid not to.